This is Talk is Sheep, a podcast by the Wild Sheep Society of British Columbia. Come along as we take conversations that matter to you into the high alpine.
Good day, sir.
It is, isn't it?
So this is a cool one. We got Mike Bridger coming on. He's a regional biologist for Flynn Row, and actually he's Northeast Resource Management and Major Projects is his purview now, and he's basically heavily involved in the caribou recovery program, and really interesting podcast with Mike.
Oh, yeah. I've known Mike for a bunch of years, as have you. And before he was even involved with government. And yeah, he's always fascinating to talk to. Always learn something. And yeah, this is a great one. We talk about everything from sheep to caribou to wolves and everything in between. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this podcast. I'm glad we finally were able to get the approval from government to put it together.
Yeah, so two emotive issues that we jumped into: caribou recovery and predator management. So that's obviously a hot topic that creates a lot of controversy. And really, our Act Now campaign was kind of around that, basing, wildlife decisions on science and just really advocating for that to the government. So kind of ties in with that. And then also we talk about this illegal sheep harvest in 2021 and the rash there. So Mike's got some pretty alarming figures for us. A little disturbing, to be honest with you, but there's a really strong message and some things that we've learned from it, and we've learned about what we need to do better collectively.
Well, I'll be blunt. It's a lot disturbing, right? Hearing some of those trends that he gets into. It's every single one of them is preventable, right? And how do we stop that? And as a society, we're digging into what we can do from our side for an educational piece. But yeah, that's the disappointing part to me is every one of those sheep that was taken illegally, the person that pulled the trigger thought what they were doing was legal. So how do we change that?
Yeah, and Mike gives some really good tips there on his thoughts around it. So I want to ask our listeners, we talked about as a society, we have to do a better job. And, we've always used our show as that catalyst where, you sit down, you get to put your hands on sheep. We get a regional bio in there or a scientist of some sort talking about, aging and the importance of it. And then also beyond that, selecting a mature ram and what that looks like instead of, as Mike points out, just aging on annuli alone is a very challenging, very daunting thing. And that's where some of these people have made mistakes. They aged a sheep. They thought it wasn't full curl, thought it was 8 and it was 7 or less. And they ended up pulling the trigger on something that wasn't legal. So I'd like to hear from our listeners. Would you guys be interested in us doing a seminar in British Columbia? Send us an email, communications@wildsheepsociety.com, and let us know, what you'd like to see. I'm thinking we should be doing something in the summer, June or July, and get together. We could do it up in Kamloops. We could do it in the Lower Mainland, kind of where the most demand is, and get people out so they can get their hands on some sheep, horns, do some aging, and hear from the experts on how to age sheep so that we get some educational pieces out there. The society in itself, we're working on internally, we're working on a program. Basically, it's web-based to educate you on horn aging and selecting mature rams. it is an internal process. There's a lot of work that, as you can imagine, that's going to this. Jesse Bone, one of our directors, he's the lead on it. He's doing a fantastic job, but it's a slow process. We're hoping to have a preliminary course out prior to this season, but it'll be very rudimentary at this point. And we'll just continue to build on it so we can have making more informed decisions in the field and try and get away from this illegal harvest.
Yeah, it's education, right? Sheep are tough. They really are. They're not like counting points on a deer. But yeah, like I've told you many times with our chats, I would never venture into the field with the intent of pulling my trigger without spending hours and hours and hours checking legalities, or having an experienced sheep hunter like yourself or Mike or any of the others that I talk to say, you know what, this one looks legal to me, but you have to make that call yourself. And just, yeah, it's tough. Educate.
Well, that's just it. Interesting. This year, we let a beautiful ram walk away. I'm sure he was absolutely legal, but just, the circumstances, we weren't sure how to let him walk. And I have no doubt that somebody probably did harvest them this year that was able to get closer, make a better assessment. Conditions were more conducive, but, you do have to let them walk is the challenge. Even on my first ram, it was a really good ram, well past his nose. And Mike goes, I think he's legal. It wasn't like, it was clearly legal, but it wasn't like Mike's like, it wasn't shoot. It was like, I think he's legal, but figure it out for yourself. And, and very obvious at what he was on age and horn length. But, it's one of those things where it's just such a tough thing, and we need to do a better job. And as Mike said, if we don't start doing a better job as sheep hunters in BC, the regulations are going to change. This is not sustainable, so we have to do a better job in the future.
Yeah, you can't take that bullet back once you've sent it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No catch and release on stone sheep, or sheep, any sheep. So, okay, Wild Sheep Raffles, get your tickets. We need a little bit of help there. We actually were further ahead at this point last year. We are going to sell out on a couple of them for sure. They're well on their way. But if you're thinking about getting tickets, get out there, buy them. Again, all the money from these tickets go to conservation projects in BC. So you're not only getting a chance for a kick-ass hunt, but you're also supporting conservation. So it's a win-win. You can't go wrong with that. We have a Life Member raffle that's live now. So if you're a Life Member, you can go over, buy a ticket. They're $100, and you get a Yeti mug out of the deal with our logo on it, and you get your name in for a hunt with Silver Sage Outfitters on a raffle. There's only 200 tickets. Odds are insane. Now we got two raffles going on right now around antelope, so it's confusing. We got our WSR. They're a $10 ticket, but the odds compared to a $100 ticket, which have kick-ass odds. So, kind of two opportunities there. And with this $100 ticket, you're also getting the Yeti mug. So pretty cool. Great support from Yeti on that. Thanks to Silver Sage Outfitters. And it's just a great hunt. And you're going to go chase pronghorns in southern Alberta.
Yeah, Life Membership has its privileges, as they say, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Our Life members are the lifeblood of this organization. We want to recognize you guys and gals that are supporting us there. So great opportunity if you're interested in the raffle. Congratulations, Taylor. Taylor was the winner of our last podcast. What was the question? It was around cougars and Siobhan's favorite name for cougars. So, which was Mountain Screamer.
Yep, Mountain Screamer.
Yeah, cool.
Which was a name I'd never heard that name before for a cougar.
I don't think I have either. I probably did, but anyway, congratulations, Taylor. We're sending your stuff out. Thanks for interacting with us there. What else we got, Steve? Anything else we need to announce today?
No, I don't think so. Just truly loving the support you guys are showing us, leaving likes and reviews wherever you podcast, and that helps the listenership grow and gets us into more audiences. Yeah,
and actually, now that we say that, we have a likes and shares thing going on social media right now. So help us out. Get over there, like and share. You can see the rules on our social media pages. So we need all three platforms. We need to the Wild Sheep Society BC platform, the One Campfire platform, and Talk is Sheep platform. We have Talk is Sheep on, I think it's only on Instagram. We don't have anything on Facebook. Yeah. So get over there, like and share. And we're giving away a Yeti cooler, a Yeti 65, and a
Sitka Aerolite.
that's right, Sitka Aerolite, and then some WSSBC swag, right?
Yeah.
So 3 chances to win. Once we hit 10,000 on wild sheep and 1 campfire, whatever that number was, and Talk Sheep, whatever those numbers are. Once we hit those targets, we're going to give away those things. So the first one, we'll do a random draw. If you like and share, your name will go in, and chance to win. So pretty cool opportunity. Yep. Great support from Yeti and Sitka on that. And yeah, episode 61, right, buddy?
61 already.
Okay, Mike Bridger, enjoy the show.
If you looked up the words conservation superhero in the dictionary, you would see a picture of our friend Omer from Precision Optics. A tireless donor and supporter of all things wild sheep, Precision Optics, located in Quesnel, British Columbia, truly stands alone in the high alpine. From optics to rifles to outdoor gear and a knowledge that cannot be surpassed, toss in that killer smile and you have a total conservation package. Precision Optics, we are truly thankful for the support you show us every step of the way. Find them online at precisionoptics.net or in Aroma Foods, located just off Highway 97 in Quesnel, BC.
So this was a journey in itself. With government, we have to get these approvals. So we've been trying to have you on the show for literally months here. And so thanks to you for your patience, and thanks to your, the media side of the government for working with us. So we really appreciate you coming on the show, and we're really, your messaging's really important, and just glad we can connect today.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I apologize for all the hoops you have to jump through to get us government folk on the podcast, but glad we got it done and we're here today.
No, absolutely, and yeah, we're super grateful that they let you talk to us, and you're doing great work up there in the north, so it's really nice to catch up, and lots of topics. Before we started recording here, we sort of talked about some of the big hot topic items in BC right now, and there's lots to go around, and just in the sheep world, we've got 4 or 5 pretty serious things we need to tackle short term, not to mention what's going on with all the other work that's out there. So.
Yeah, no shortage of conservation topics these days, whether it be sheep or caribou or what have you. There's plenty to discuss.
Absolutely. So anyway, before we get to that, let's talk about your fall. Did you get out and chase some sheep around? I see a beautiful stone, a goat on your wall behind you there. So what did your fall look like for Mike Bridger?
Oh, it was great. I mean, one the perks of my job is that I can generally take a fair bit of time off in the fall. So yeah, we did our annual stone sheep hunt. We've been getting out every year doing that, and had a beautiful trip this year. The weather was great. We saw a good number of sheep, some nice rams, some up and comers, a few legal sheep that just weren't quite what we were looking for, and then yeah, elk season, that's sort of my favorite. After the sheep hunt in September, I spent a lot of time chasing the elk. Love that. Had a great year. We're really lucky up here in the Peace region to have some phenomenal elk populations and elk hunting opportunities. And then I devoted a lot of time to chasing whitetails up here in November. Again, like we've got some pretty phenomenal opportunity to hunt big old smart whitetails up here in the Peace, and had a lot of fun doing that. Learned a lot this year that I can hopefully apply to next year. And no, it was a great fall. Yeah, I'm looking forward to next year already.
Yeah, I remember when you lived in Prince, you used to do pretty good around here for elk. You used to see some pictures, and it was always the secret locations. Now that you're gone, maybe you should message me with
I'm sure you know them all by now, Steve. Yeah, the elk hunting, yeah, in my later years in Prince George was starting to get better. I'm sure it's got even better since then.
Very cool. So, Mike, our history goes back to the sheep world, and I met you. I think it was in Kelowna the first year, and it was Johnny and Marsh and a bunch of us just had a great time and talking about sheep, and always just love hearing your stories. And so, but actually, we stayed in touch over the years, and we've done lots of work with you, and you've been very involved in the sheep world. But what were the early beginnings like? Where did you come from, and where did you're a young guy in the the BC biology world and the science world and working for the government, but where did this interest come from? How did that come about?
Yeah, good question. Well, I actually, my family moved out from Northern Ontario when I was fairly young, moved to BC. And so I grew up in the Kootenays, spent a lot of time out outdoors then, had some really good mentors, whether it be that my dad or some other hunting mentors that got me out lots hunting and fishing. So that passion took off at a pretty young age, and then I started to pursue that in post-secondary education in Prince George at the University of Northern British Columbia. Started taking the fish and wildlife management program there. While I was doing that, I was also working as a hunting guide, sort of in the off season of school, and had a lot of unbelievable experiences doing that. I still miss that to this day. But I finished a bachelor's of science in the fish and wildlife programs there, and then had an opportunity to carry on and do a master's degree as well in wildlife biology. And so, by then the seed was firmly planted that I wanted to work in the wildlife biology realm, and definitely had interest in getting on with government, because that's really where the decisions are being made, and I wanted to be part of that. And so luckily when my master's was finishing up, I had an opportunity to come up here to Fort St. John as a fish and wildlife biologist, and I've been here for almost 7 years now. Time flies. Like, I still feel like I'm fairly early in my career, but 7 years has gone by, and my job's progressed a little bit. I went from a fish and wildlife biologist to sort of a regional wildlife biologist that you'd be familiar with, and then in the last few years, I'm working now specifically for the caribou recovery program for the province, and so my focus these days is a bit more on caribou and predator prey dynamics, but I still have some roles and responsibilities on some other species up here in the Northeast, like sheep, moose, things like that.
Right on, man. Well, we appreciate everything that you've done in the sheep world, and you've done a great job of bringing a lot of knowledge to our community and getting us to understand things better. But it seems, I guess, topical, and we've kind of Steve and I have both been communicating with you through this engagement process around caribou, and you've been involved in that project. Do you maybe want to just give us an overview of the project itself, the Caribou Recovery Project, kind of soup to nuts? And I know, this project has been ongoing for a number of years, and just kind of where we're at today with the project. And then there'll be a bunch of questions that will come from that, obviously.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a multifaceted program. There's a lot going on, whether that be working on the habitat protection, restoration side of things, recreation management, predator management is a big one that is, of course, topical these days and is probably of interest to your listeners. We just went through a pretty lengthy engagement process to continue our predator management actions to support caribou recovery. So I know you guys have talked about that on this podcast. You guys had a great episode there with Joe Appel around that whole engagement process on the continuation of wolf and cougar reduction in the province. So that's a big one that I've spent quite a bit of time on. We've had success with these programs. We look at that predator reduction work as sort of a short-term tool that we are using to help get these caribou populations back on track, to stabilize them or to get them increasing while we address some of these bigger picture issues, namely the habitat condition. Trying our best to protect habitat and to restore habitat. That's really going to be the key to the long-term success of caribou in this province, but it's super challenging. There's massive trade-offs to consider when recovering caribou. Is probably the most complex conservation challenge we're dealing with, certainly in BC, probably in North America right now. The trade-offs between recovering a species at risk and economies on the line, jobs on the line. It's very multifaceted and very challenging.
Yeah, definitely tough to get that balance right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's easy just to say, well, protect all the habitat, but I mean, you're talking about people's jobs and livelihoods on the line. It's a wicked problem for sure.
So, Mike, just one of the things. So we talked about, you mentioned species at risk. So just for our listeners, and I try to get my brain around this. So I think under COSEWIC designation, they're declared endangered, and then federally, the federal government's consider them species at risk. Are we correct on that terminology? And what are the consequences of those designations? Because I know federally there are consequences for that species at risk designation.
Yeah, there's a few different designations for the different ecotypes of caribou in the province. So, but yeah, you're right. If a species becomes federally listed as endangered, they can pull some pretty hard levers to help protect those species. So there's agreements between the province and the Canada, the federal government, right now to let the province do their best, do our best to try to protect those caribou without having to go to some pretty extreme measures that would be enforced by the federal government. So that's kind of the stage where we're at. Some of these caribou are special concern, some are threatened. And as of right now, I don't believe any are actually listed as endangered, but definitely some of them are on the brink of that designation.
Okay. So now let's talk about, I guess, the recovery process. So I know you've been heavily involved with the predator prey part of it, and very on the ground there. So we've seen actually some pretty significant recovery in areas where there has been some predator reduction. Can you talk a little bit about those numbers? I've seen some like 60-70% herd recoveries. Now, granted, they're quite small herds, but we're seeing some pretty significant impacts there that speak to, I guess, let's talk to the positives of this reduction program that you guys are working on.
Sure. Yeah. So where we've got some pretty good data sets, where we've been doing this work for 7 to 8 years now, we've seen some pretty phenomenal results come out of the wolf reduction work. And furthermore, when that wolf reduction is paired with other short-term actions, whether that be maternal penning, like the Clinziza caribou herd, or supplemental feeding, like the Kennedy siding herd, um, we've seen strong results. I mean, some of these herds were declining at rates of 10 to 15% each year. And with the wolf reduction and sometimes in combination with these other measures, we've now seen them increasing at rates of 10 to 15% each year. So in that sense, we've had almost a 30-point swing in the population trajectory. So yeah, those herds have doubled, I think, since we've started wolf reduction back in 2015. I'm talking about the South Peace area, where we've got 3 different caribou herds. I believe those herds have essentially tripled at this point. It's a pretty remarkable effort. Lots of people involved. First Nations have taken a lot of ownership in recovering the caribou in the South Peace. We've got agreements around habitat protection. There's new recreation management that has been implemented. So there's a lot going on, and yeah, they're trending the right way. We just need to keep it going that way and do our best to address the habitat pieces.
Cool. So, and I want to jump into the habitat stuff around caribou too shortly, but before we go there, we get some. There's a lot of push. Oh, okay. Well, actually, before we go there, what is the current status of the program, of the predator reduction program in northern BC? So we know that there was the outstanding court case that would involved. Was it Pack Wild, I guess, brought the case forward, Rebecca Bretter. So there was that court case. There was engagement survey. We also had a letter from the United Chiefs of British Columbia. So there's been some adversity around this program and some controversy. So where are we at with the program, and how are we managing these other sort of restrictions or I guess arguments against the program itself?
Yeah, good question. So the court case is still, I guess, not settled. So the days in court are finished, and the judge has not made a decision at this point. We carried on with our plans to continue our work. So yeah, as you probably saw this year, we came to the end of our initial approvals for these programs. So we had to seek reapproval. And part of that process was doing very in-depth consultation with all of the nations that would be affected or overlapping in these areas. So we consulted with, I believe, 45 First Nations. We did targeted stakeholder engagement. So anyone who had like an overlapping tenure, say a trapper or guide outfitter that overlapped with these predator management areas, we engaged with them. And then we did that public engagement which you alluded to, which was allowing the people of BC and beyond to provide their perspective on how they felt about caribou recovery and specifically predator management. So we wrapped that up in mid-November, and we moved to the stage where it was up to the regional managers to make those decisions as to whether we would carry forth with predator reduction based on all this information that we gathered and based on the results of all the consultation. And at this point we've moved forward, and we're active in doing our predator reduction this winter, in hopes of sustaining what we've built already as far as the caribou recovery success.
Very cool. Now, Mike, with something like that, let's say for whatever reason the court case goes forward, or for whatever reason you guys have to stop. What is the impacts? And I know it's hard to prognosticate, but from your scientific background, let's say we just stop predator management. Do you think we just reverse? We go right back to where we were? Are we going to get this? And is there an imminent threat to these populations where they're going to be extirpated imminently?
Yeah, so if we had to stop doing that wolf reduction today, I think it wouldn't take long before we'd be right back where we were. That habitat piece, the protection and restoration of habitat coming back online, that's going to take a long time, decades. So if we were to stop reducing wolves right now and the habitat condition had not improved significantly, then it's very likely that the wolf populations would rebound pretty quickly. We see that on an annual basis, even when we are reducing wolves. So they're likely to respond pretty quickly, and I think we'd see the caribou starting to decline rapidly again, and we would lose that progress that we've made. The second part of your question, I mean, some of these caribou herds are still on the brink as far as their overall population size. Doesn't take, when you're dealing with small herds like this, it doesn't take much for them to reach the point of no return, and we've seen that happen mainly in the Kootenays in recent years, of herds actually becoming extirpated, and we can't go back from that. And even in the Peace region, we've had one herd become extirpated in the last 10 years, prior to some of our efforts like wolf reduction.
Yeah, so it's pretty compelling. The evidence is certainly there in favor. So there might be a moral or an ethical issue around wolf management, but in terms of science, the science supports that if you want to preserve these caribou herds, that wolf reduction is short-term a very effective solution, it seems like.
Yeah, it seems to be working. I mean, we're still gathering more data, so we've expanded our efforts into new herds in the past 2 to 3 years. Still gathering data on those. It's not a given that it's going to work for every herd. There's all kinds of factors involved. There could be other predators involved that could be holding a caribou herd back. There could be health issues, for example. So it's not a guarantee that the predator reduction will work, but where we have studied it pretty thoroughly now, it has, and we continue to monitor that very closely every year to really get a feel for what's happening out there.
Like, I can speak on the area around that I hunt, and last couple of years you used to see what people will call packs of 50, 60 wolves, right? But we know it's 10, 15, but just tracks everywhere, up and down every road. You wouldn't see ungulate tracks. And now the last couple of years, we're not seeing wolf tracks like we used to. We're seeing a couple.
Yeah.
A couple of coyotes. Coyotes have moved back in because their main predator, the wolf, is gone. And seeing moose everywhere, which is, and they're healthy looking. They're not stressed out and ticked out. Just we're seeing great calf recruitment from a non-biologist side, but I'm seeing one, sometimes two calves with a cow, and they're not pressured. It's great to see the cast off effects of the wolf control, and it's not just benefiting the caribou. Like, as we know, moose for some areas are down 70%. I'd love to know what they're like now, but like I said, anecdotally, just from boots on the ground, it's working. It's amazing to see.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's not rocket science when you take away, the primary factor of mortality for whether that's caribou or moose, you're going to see a response, and then in some cases we see it pretty quickly. Like we've seen the adult survival of both caribou and moose in some of these areas increase substantially, and in most cases we see the calf numbers increase pretty rapidly as well. Now the calves are a little trickier. There's more predators that key in on those calves. So in some places, even where we're doing this intensive wolf reduction, we still have poor calf numbers in our caribou population. So that points to maybe some other issues, whether that be predators like wolverine, for example, or bears, or maybe there's something going on with the health of those caribou that they're not, not calving as successfully as they should be. So lots of different factors involved. Certainly, yeah, caribou are of the ungulates, they're a bit slower to respond. So if you're getting a strong response out of the caribou through wolf reduction, you can guarantee you're getting an even stronger response out of other ungulates like moose and deer and elk. And that's something we also need to consider and manage. And that's managing the primary prey. That's a topic that comes up in BC as well.
Yeah, right on, Mike. So we talked about the survey, the engagement survey that was done, and like you said, during that engagement survey, Joe Appel was on the show, and we were trying to, get the word out for people to weigh in, just let their opinions be heard. You said you have some findings from that, and there actually was an actual paper published on that. Can you talk about what the results were and what you found from that public engagement piece?
Yeah, for sure. I can cover some of the high level stuff. So we produced what we call a What We Heard report from that public engagement, and that's available online for anyone who's interested in diving deep into the stats of that survey. So overall, we had pretty good response. We had over 15,000 surveys filled out. I believe the majority, around 86% of those survey users were British Columbia residents. Not a big surprise, but the majority of those big British Columbia residents came from the southern portion of our province, from the west coast and then the south coast. And so what we saw, sort of the overall finding, I guess, if you will, is that of those that responded, about 59% of respondents were not in favor of using predator reduction as a tool to recover caribou, and about 37% were in support of predator reduction. And then, of course, there'd be a few percentage points that were sitting on the fence. It was interesting that a lot of the survey users brought up plenty of fair points around the habitat pieces. That BC needs to do better on protecting habitat and restoring habitat, and those are all fair comments. Yeah, you guys hopefully had a chance to go through that survey and see that sort of the information that we provided. What did you guys think of it?
Actually, to be honest, I felt it. There was parts of it was pretty darn confusing.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was specific, there was some good questions, and there is no doubt there for sure. But there was parts where specific herds and focusing on, and in all fairness, I did it 3 or 4 months ago, so I'm a little hazy on the details. But I found that pretty confusing, especially as a BC guy that's involved in conservation that knows a little bit about the province. I'm not knowledgeable by any stretch, but I would say if you compared me to the average Victorian, I probably know as much or more than the average Victorian. And I was lost in specific herds, and we're kind of supposed to be providing some input in it. And I felt my input there was useless, to be honest with you. I was looking on a map trying to figure out where these places were.
Yeah, I felt it was too dialed down. What areas are you going to recreate in? What herd, as Kyle said, what herd do you feel is the most important? To me, looking at it from the outside, 10,000 foot, is northwest important to you? Northeast important to you? Central important? You know what I mean? Just it was a little.
Mm.
It was a little. I get where you guys were going with it. It was just a little too complex for the average person, and even for somebody like Kyle and I who've been up to a lot of these areas. It was a little. I heard of that herd, but where is it exactly on a map type thing? So
Right. Yeah. No, that's all fair feedback appreciate that. Yeah, these things are tough to put together, especially in a a short amount of time that we were kind of under short notice. So yeah, we'll definitely, we've listened to quite a bit of feedback on this, and we'll be ready and we'll do better next time.
I actually thought it was a generally good survey. 8 minutes is what a friend of mine timed it. He said it took him 8 minutes. I think that's very reasonable. Obviously, there's enough, 15,000 surveys. That's actually a really good engagement, right? So I guess it tells you how emotive this issue is. And I find it interesting that almost two-thirds of the people spoke against it. So that's surprising to me that because we shared it heavily in our circles. So I presume most hunters, when they look at it and they think about caribou in the broader picture and they realize the positive impacts of it, I would expect most of the hunters would have been in favor of the wolf reduction personally.
Yeah, I think that was the case. I think we had about 3,000 or 36 respondents that identified themselves as hunters, trappers. So that's not bad. I mean, the results there, it could have easily been skewed even farther the other direction. I'm surprised the survey didn't go a little bit more broad across North America or even international. We've seen, the conversation around wolf reduction be a hot topic even beyond BC. So it was good to see that a lot of the respondents were British Columbia residents. I think it was about 98% of respondents all agreed that caribou recovery is very important to them. So that's half the battle right there. So people are engaged and interested and have a wide variety of opinions on what we should be doing.
Yeah, it's good. And kudos to, the wildlife managers and the decision makers. And I don't know if you're part of that process, Mike, but you guys are staying the course on this piece. You're looking at it holistically from an ecosystem perspective, not an individual species perspective about managing the ecosystem. So staying the course on the reduction, even when we have it's not a slam dunk against the wolf call or whatever wolf reduction, but it is definitely in favor of not doing it anymore. So I'm glad that the wildlife managers are looking at it holistically and getting the opinion, considering it, but still pressing on with what they think is best for the ecosystem, and that's encouraging, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And we're in a tough spot around caribou recovery. Like as far as short-term measures go, there's not a lot else that we can do, and there's not a lot else that has been shown to be this successful in reversing the trends of these caribou populations. So we definitely recognize that it's unpalatable to many people that live in BC, and we don't envision this as doing this in perpetuity. But for now, it is working, and it works even better when we couple it with other short-term recovery actions.
Yeah, it's a piece of a larger puzzle, as you've said, and no doubt you've seen me say on some of the groups, like it takes 80 years, 90 years, 100 years to grow proper habitat for what these caribou need. And we can't do that in our lifetime, or likely even in our kids' lifetimes. We need to do something now that's actionable and measurable to put a band-aid while we stitch the wound up. So
Yep, you're absolutely right, Steve. Yeah, you got it.
So, Mike, let's jump into now, segue a bit off the predator management piece and talk a little bit about. So, we talked about recreational management, and and that was quite a controversial piece that came up recently. There was that engagement that I think the premier was involved in. He was in northern BC in this public engagement piece, and I believe he was there. I could be wrong on that, but regardless, there was kind of a town hall to discuss this, and obviously, industries affected on the habitat piece, but also just and it goes well beyond hunters, right? It's snowmobilers is a big one. They obviously are severely impacted by this. So, can you talk a little bit about that and where we're at with that aspect of it?
Sure. Yeah, a bit. I mean, so it's a little bit outside of my realm of expertise, but I've been involved in the process a little bit at arm's length. My colleagues up here have put a tremendous amount of work into the recreational management. And yeah, you're right. The latest sort of round of this was mainly geared towards snowmobiling, and snowmobile access into caribou range. And yeah, again, there's been some closures. I know my colleagues worked very hard in trying to find that balance and worked as closely as they could with snowmobile groups around trying to maintain opportunity to get into the backcountry. We know how much people um, cherish that and how passionate they are about that. Again, it's all about these trade-offs of trying to do best for caribou while still trying to maintain opportunity for recreational users. I think they found a fairly good balance, although I still know people are upset. Um, it's a super challenging realm to be working in, to be honest. Um, we'll never make decisions that make everyone happy, right? There's just no way. Whether we're talking about recreational access, or they're talking about hunting regulations, you can just never make everyone happy. So um, it is what it is. That's where we're at with the snowmobile closures. It's a good step towards caribou recovery, but I recognize that it's a touchy subject for those users that are affected by it.
Well, the challenge moving forward with just wildlife in general is there's just going to be more non-consumptive users in the backcountry. It's just, and COVID's exasperated that. Probably, maybe not so much in the north. I could be wrong on that, but certainly in southern BC, we know that. So it's kind of one of those things where, as our base of people, as our population grows, there's just going to be more pressure on backcountry, and then obviously have a cumulative effect on wildlife. So it's a tough one to be in, and it's not going to get better anytime soon.
Yeah, it really is, Kyle. It's yeah, I'm sort of glad that I don't have to dive too deep into that world, but my colleagues sure do, and they put a ton of work in trying to find that balance.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, let's move a little bit to the habitat piece, and then we'll move on to some other subjects because we got a bunch to cover off today. But what are some of the things short term that we're working on the habitat piece in the north that are helping caribou? What's a short term solution and we all know that this is a multi-generational thing that we need to tackle, but what's being done sort of on the short term, or what can we do short term that's going to have the most important impact for caribou?
Yeah, on the short term, the habitat stuff is tricky, right? Usually when we think about getting the habitat back online, it's a long-term conversation. But some of the restoration that we're working on, mainly along linear features, whether that's old roads or seismic lines, some of that can have potentially could be a shorter term effect, especially what we call a functional restoration, where we go onto linear features and either block them or mound them, or we cross hatch them with trees. The whole idea there is to make it more difficult for predators like wolves to move along those linear features. So in theory, that could have a shorter term effect, could come online relatively quickly. But even the restoration is a long-term game, and there's a lot to do, and it's very expensive, and it's not that simple. I mean, a lot of these roadways, linear features, pipelines, etc., are still under tenure. We don't have access to actually go out and treat them, so it's a big challenge. But again, there is a ton of work ongoing there. Um, when we're taking strides towards protection, like generally the province, we're getting pretty good at protecting core caribou habitat. The challenge though is still dealing with what we call the matrix habitat, and that's the habitat that's adjacent to core caribou habitat but can still have an influence on caribou. So in areas where we've created early cereal forests in that matrix habitat, where we've seen explosions in the moose population, which in turn have led to explosions in the wolf populations, which of course then predate on the caribou. And that's the challenge that we face in a lot of these herds. That's sort of the main driver of caribou declines across the province. So still
Right
lots of
on.
work to be done on that.
So when you involve industry in this now, right? And a lot of these things you're talking about are industry related issues. How does that factor in? Like, how do we work with, again, the logging industry, the mining industry, all these different industries that are impacted and people's livelihood? How how does that all come together, and what's the balancing piece on there? Are a lot of these industries you're wanting to work with the ministry and find solutions, or is it just kind of a constant battle where it's two groups that have diametrically opposed objectives that are trying to figure things out?
Right. Yeah. No, I think there's some synergies there. I don't work on it directly a ton myself, but a lot of my colleagues do. I think there's common ground there for sure. I mean, a lot of the challenges I guess we have with industrial practices are sort of tied up in legislation. Whether that be the rules around free to grow, silviculture practices within cut blocks and things like that. Those changes sort of need to be made at a higher level before we can start implementing some of those what we would call beneficial management practices that would um, go a long way in supporting caribou recovery. I don't know that we're there yet in all the industries, but certainly lots of conversations going on there, and I'm feeling pretty confident we'll get to a better place there. But again, yeah, trade-offs. I mean, the province, the economy is important, jobs are important, natural resource extraction is always going to be a big part of the province's economy, and we have to find that balance.
Yeah, for sure. Well said. Cool. All right. Anything else to touch on habitat or predator prey reduction around caribou? Anything else we should know, or can we skip to our next subject?
Well, I think we can move along. Yeah, I appreciate the dialogue there. I mean, yeah, we could talk about predator reduction and the impacts of wolves on caribou and other ungulates for hours here. So if you have any more questions, we can circle back later, but happy to move on.
Cool. So, through this fall has been a rough fall around sheep harvest, and we've known there's a number of immature sheep that were um, harvested illegal sheep. And I know you've been involved in those discussions, being in the Peace region there, Mike. And we've kind of throughout the season we've touched base with you and Bill Jex and just some dialogue on what's going on around there. So, yeah, we're curious to know where we're at. We know there were some illegal sheep shot this year, quite a few more than normal. So let's just jump into that and kind of get an overview of where we're at with illegal sheep harvest in 2021.
Yeah, no, it was a tough year, and it's good to be on here with you guys, and maybe we can talk about some solutions or thoughts on how we can do better. But yeah, so even despite working for the caribou program, I still sort of have my finger on the pulse of the sheep harvest management here in the Peace region. I still do the determinations for legality on sheep. And yeah, we had a lot of illegal sheep come through this year. 18, in fact, I think is where we're sitting right now. So the 18 sheep that were deemed to be short of full curl and under the age of 8. So 18 compared to our typical average is about 3 to 4 a year. So this was a massive jump in illegal sheep.
Is this just the Peace region, Mike?
Yeah, sorry, this is just for the Peace region alone. I don't
Okay.
have the numbers for the Skeena on hand, so apologize for that. But yeah, I'm talking
No, that's good.
the Peace region, where we do have the majority of stone sheep, and we do have higher hunting pressure than the Skeena. But yeah, that it was a really tough year to see that. The harvest was higher this year as well. We were up to just over around 225 rams harvested in the Peace region this year. Usually average around 200, so that's actually the highest the harvest has been since 2012, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but when you combine it with some of the underlying statistics around the ages, it doesn't look great. And I can break that down a bit for you guys. So this year, 32% of the rams harvested were 7 or under. So about 1 in 3 rams that came in were young, were 7 or younger. So we usually average around 20%, 7 or younger. So that was quite a bump up in the wrong direction. And if I break that down a little farther, again, I'm not trying to pit residents against non-residents in any sense here, but the resident harvest, the performance there was not great. It was 42% of resident harvest was 7 or younger, which is the worst we've had on record that I can see going back 20 years or so. usually the average is around 27% for residents, 7 or younger. So to go to 42% was a substantial jump in the wrong direction again this year. And the non-resident harvest as well, that was 18% of non-resident harvest was 7 or younger. They usually average around 13%, so there was an increase there as well, not to the extent that the resident harvest jumped though. So those are the numbers. Curious to see what you guys think.
Wow, those ones that were seized for being illegal. Do you have any idea if the people that took them thought they were full curl, or were they shot on what they thought was legal age?
The majority were age-related issues. Yeah, the majority of them, hunters came in believing they had aged them at 8 or older. There was a few that were misjudged based on full curl as well, but the majority were age-related mistakes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So what do I think? Not good. It's brutal. Really, really sad that's happening. And yeah, I want to have more discussion on that. But there's this high harvest rate of these young rams, and obviously it has implications. Obviously, the regulations are stipulated for a reason, biologically and scientifically. So, can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of harvesting these mature rams and the impact that these illegal rams and these young ram harvests this year are going to have on herds?
For sure, yeah. So it's a really good point to bring up. So when we, generally when we look at the harvest, it is sort of a representation of what's available in the population. So when you see a good proportion of old rams in the harvest, that generally means they're available. But when you see lots of young rams and fewer old rams in the harvest, that potentially means that there are fewer and fewer old mature rams in the population. And old rams, they have importance for a few different reasons. Certainly for it's important to target old rams because these are the sheep that have already contributed to the breeding population. They've probably bred many times over the years, and as they age, they're more likely to die of natural causes anyhow. So harvesting those rams is less impactful to the population. These bigger, older rams, they have some social responsibilities, if you will, like especially when it comes to the mating season. They tend to bring some structure into the breeding season, where they're doing the majority of the breeding. They are fending off younger rams. They're better at breeding. They're breeding the ewes on time, which leads to lambing on time in the spring. If you remove some of those older rams, bigger rams, you may lose that sort of social structure. And what you can have is a lot of young, inexperienced rams breeding, for the first few, maybe the first time. And it can be a lot more chaotic. They're fighting a lot more. They're chasing ewes a lot more. So there can be more stress on the rams themselves. There can be more stress on the ewes. It could lead to delayed breeding just with the chaos, and that can lead to delayed lambing. And if a lamb is born late in the spring, it can have lower likelihood of surviving. There's also some research that has shown that bigger, mature rams also produce bigger, healthier lambs. I think there's been some research on bighorn sheep that's shown that. So it's another advantage of having big sheep around. And then, potentially you go, if the harvest pressure and the selective harvest pressure is high enough, you could start to have some genetic implications on sheep. And what I mean by that is if you're targeting or putting harvest pressure on those young, fast-growing rams, so those 6 and 7-year-old rams that reach legal status early on in life because they are fast-growing. Over time, if you put enough pressure on those cohorts, you could see that the genetics for that fast, long-growing horn growth start to diminish, and that's been shown pretty conclusively in bighorn populations. But and Dr. Festa Bianchit has talked about that quite a bit recently. And the same principles could apply to stone sheep if the harvest pressure was high enough. And there certainly are some areas in the region where harvest pressure does appear to be high. In some of the popular fly-in lakes, or some of these areas that have become popular because they've produced big rams over the years, we are seeing pretty intensive hunting pressure in some of those areas.
That's really good, a really good understanding of it, Mike. And I always try and explain it. I never do a great job, and I'm just going to record that and just share that with people when they ask why it's important to kill older rams. So I appreciate the, I guess, the background on that, why it's so important. Just out of curiosity, you talked about increased pressure. Um, what's what's our stone sheep pops like? Is it, would you say it's stable? Is it decreasing? Where are we at just holistically in the piece? Is it pretty much steady, stable?
Yeah, I mean, as far as we know, so we don't get to inventory and count sheep probably as much as we'd like to. They're hard to count. They're very expensive species to count in these huge areas. So as best, when we look at the harvest data, it suggests some stability. Harvest has been pretty constant over time. Um, the age declining could potentially mean there's some issues with older rams, but in the broad scheme of things, um, as long as there's rams present, the ewes will be getting bred, and the sheep population will probably hang in there all right. Um, so based on what we've seen in the surveys that we have done, it seems like they're stable. They may not be the numbers that they were maybe a few decades ago, but they seem to be hanging in there okay. The lamb numbers that we've recorded in recent years suggest population stability. Um, we did a winter survey in one of the more popular stone sheep management units last year, and counted, yeah, a really good number of sheep, that would suggest not much has changed in the population size since it was last surveyed about a decade ago. And there was still a decent proportion of what we call class 4 rams, or like full curl and mature rams, that had made it through the hunting season despite high harvest pressure. So things look okay on that front. Generally, as long as the habitat condition is okay, and the predator populations aren't out of hand, the sheep seem to hold their own. And of course, we have no reason to believe there's any disease issues in these northern stone sheep populations at this time either. So that's good news for now.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit about, go back to the illegal sheep that were harvested this year. I know you guys have been doing some forensic work on that, doing some interviews with, of course, all these sheep are CI'd, so you have a pretty good analysis of how many there are. And have you guys had an opportunity to sort of do some forensic work and try and understand what happened and why these are happening?
Yeah, a little bit, Kyle. Like when they come in to me, say for an official determination, sometimes the hunter's there, sometimes they're not. So I get to have a bit of an initial conversation. I'll often ask, well, like, what did you see, or what were you shooting it based off, and those kind of things. But really, my role is just to make that determination, and then we hand it over to the conservation officer service to take it from there. I think they have, the more detailed conversations about exactly what happened. So in that sense, I don't often know the full story, right? But I can certainly tell you that there was a mix this year of really new novice hunters that had made some mistakes. There was some experienced hunters that made mistakes this year as well, and I don't know exactly how to explain why that happened at a higher rate this year. Um, but again, generally, it came down to maybe some overconfidence in the ability to age sheep under field conditions, which is very challenging.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I've not shot dozens of sheep for that very reason, which may very well have been legal. But so on that subject, what's part? So I guess first of all, what's going to happen? If this is a pervasive issue, where does this go? What is the ministry is obviously going to react, because this is unacceptable, the high harvest rate of immature rams. So what's a possible outcome around this if this was to happen again this coming year? What might be a possible outcome, or what? And I know that's a complex process, but what could be an outcome of this?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to even speculate much, and I don't want to raise alarms. I think it's really important that this message gets out there, and you guys do a great job of spreading the message. And I'd like to think that this is a problem that could be fixed within, and by within I mean within the sheep hunting community, before we have to go to the regulatory options. I think if sheep hunters really bear down here, this can be solved from within. So I mean, there's a multitude of different ways you could try to regulate these sort of problems. All would have their pros and cons. All would, many of the options would be unpalatable to most hunters. I hope we don't have to go down that road. I really do have faith that this is something that can be fixed simply just by making better decisions on the mountain. And if we don't get down there, then if we don't get to that point, then maybe we have to start looking at regulation. But we really value that opportunity for sheep hunters to be able to hunt over in a general open season every year if they choose to. That's a great opportunity, and we don't want to have to take that away.
Yeah, it's frustrating to me, having been out on the landscape so many times and seeing so many rams that were, so close, right? You're so close, and you just don't go there. And when we see numbers like this, it's really, really sad to see. So obviously the education component is so critical, right? So how can we do a better job of that? Like internally, the society's working on. We've had a little bit of horn aging stuff, but even some of the stuff we had on the website, there was some conjecture, and some people had some issues with some of the stuff. And of course, we're not experts, so we have access to the Mike Bridgers of the world and experts that do know their stuff. So we're getting that information out there and making sure it's crystal clear and making sure we're perfect on that as well is so important. So what can we do better? How can we do a better job of educating hunters so that they can make better decisions in the field?
Yeah, well, here's my take on it. The education piece, I think, is critical. Educating hunters to be aware of age and aware of the implications like we just talked about, the importance of having old rams and maybe passing on younger rams. So educating hunters on how to recognize age versus young rams, I think, is really important, and getting them to that point where they're okay with walking away from younger rams, I think, is really critical. I guess my one concern is that we put too much emphasis on trying to educate hunters on how to count annuli as a means of making a decision in the field. I don't want to have hunters feeling overconfident, I guess, if you will, because they've gone through, on a website, and they've aged these sheep, based on slides on a PowerPoint presentation. It's not the same as trying to do it out in the field. You guys know that. So I don't want to put too much emphasis on teaching hunters how to age to the point where they're trying to differentiate between a 7 and an 8-year-old ram in the field. It's just too risky. We've seen time and time again that the vast majority of hunters, especially under field conditions, are struggling with this. And that's why it says in the regulations, don't shoot based off of annuli, even though that is a legal means of doing it. There's inherent risks in doing it. And I'll give you an example. Like I had the luxury of working up in the Northwest Territories guiding Dall sheep hunts, and you'd see a lifetime worth of rams up there, compared to a stone in one season up there. You probably get a lifetime worth of rams, if you compare that to stone sheep hunting. Get to see a ton, get to age a ton, get lots of rams in hand. And then, in my job now, I get to see a lot of rams come through, all the photos, all the rams that come to me in hand. But even after that, like when I go hunting in the field, I still encounter rams that I cannot conclusively get an age on in the field through a spotting scope. So for new or relatively new hunters to come into the field and think that they can make that call with 100% certainty, it doesn't seem, it's just not working right now.
Yeah, me as a new sheep hunter, there's no bloody way. I've done all these things online, and I've chatted with bios, and I'm confident doing it online, but there's no bloody way I would do it in the field. And I've told Kyle, you know what? If I'm shooting my first sheep, it has to be a double twister, or you're with me going, yes, that is legal. I need somebody experienced that has just months and months of worth of field judging. It's there's so many things in play, and number one is your nerves, right? It's hard enough to count points on a deer, and I at 200, 300, 400 yards through a spotting scope trying to count annuli. No thanks, no bloody way.
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, and every ram's different. Like in some horns, the annuli show up beautifully, and some, I mean, they're extremely difficult to see. And then you throw some false rings in the mix, and you throw heat waves into your spotting scope, or a bit of wind. I mean, there's just a multitude of factors. I'm not taking away from the ability of people to do it. Certainly they can, and we do like to have that opportunity to shoot old rams that aren't full curl. But you just have to be so careful, and we have to get more willing to walk away from sheep.
So that's a great point, Mike, that you make there, the walk away thing. So you're an experienced sheep hunter, you're a guide, you're a biologist, you've dealt with this. Give us kind of you're a new sheep hunter, you're out in the field. We know guys are making mistakes. Give us your, tips to making sure you don't, what's important. And there's some stuff at the top of mind for me, but in your world, obviously making sure and full curl. Yeah, that's clear. But what else what are some of the things that a new sheep hunter should be doing that maybe they didn't or they aren't, that you think is really important?
I mean, off the top, I think it's really important to go into the hunt with don't put any pressure on yourself to succeed. I don't know what it is, if it's a social media thing, but this day and age, it seems like hunters are putting so much pressure on themselves to come back with a sheep, and that right away I think is the wrong mentality to go into a hunt with. Just go in and have fun and hope to see some rams, and be totally content with coming home empty handed, I think is important. But as far as actually making that call, the good optics are definitely important. Get close. There's no reason with a little extra work that you can't get close to these sheep. They don't have to be shot from 700 yards away. Get close, take your time. I think it's really important, if you can, go with a mentor who can provide some guidance and some expertise. It seems this day and age that sheep hunting's definitely gotten popular. It's gotten trendy. It seems like there's a lot of new hunters that maybe even sort of skipping the general steps in hunting progression, where you start hunting grouse and deer and moose, and then kind of make your way up to the mountain hunts. It seems like there's quite a few hunters that are jumping straight into sheep hunting and just haven't got that level of patience or experience yet, and that may be leading to some of these issues as well. um, yeah, as far as being in the field, there's lots of clues to look for. I mean, when I look at a ram, and if I see annuli that at the top of the horn that are several inches apart, I'm not even giving that ram a second look as far as trying to make it legal. It's not what we're looking for. It's not worth trying to convince oneself that it's legal. I'm looking for stacked annuli in the top of the horn, looking for those double digit, 10-year-old rams. So yeah, stop trying to convince yourself that this young ram might have another annuli somewhere. Just take the pressure off yourself.
Yeah, well, those are all great pieces for sure, and sage advice. I think with me and the guy, my hunting partner Mike, he's been hunting sheep for 25 years, and there's been so many rams that we've let walk away. And kind of the rule of thumb that we use is we both have to age them, and we always give an extra year. So we're always looking for full curl anyway. But if we're looking at anything that isn't, we're not going to shoot anything that's not 9 or more, and we both agree that they're 9, because if they're at, so it's just that if there's any doubt, there is no doubt. We just have to walk away, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, give yourself some wiggle room, 9 annuli, 10 annuli, you just got to be super safe. I can't imagine a worse feeling than making that mistake.
yeah, absolutely. You know what I'd love to do, and one thing that I've talked about and advocating for is a mandatory course for sheep hunters. Just the basics to understand it. It's such a sensitive species that over harvest or illegal harvest is going to have an impact on it, and it's tough to do. Like it, with a deer, yeah, like it needs 4 points. It's pretty cut and dry, and yeah, it gets down to maybe that 1 inch part, and there isn't it's not linear there either. But with sheep, it's just so difficult. And, even there's been so many times. And again, you talked about it. There's experienced guides that make mistakes, right? Or, they're not sure and they have to walk away because, so it's such a tough thing. But I'd love to see more education, and, I'd love to get you down here this summer and do a course for us. Love to, because I think that, right now we need to do more. We need to offer more in terms of education, and having your guys like yourself in there doing these courses. And we've missed that these last 2 years. We've had no shows, so usually we'd have Mr. Walker or Mr. Jex or yourself down at these shows talking to people about horn aging, and we haven't been able to do that. So yeah, we got to do a better job, I think, on that end of things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, developing these educational pieces, yeah, is going to be really key, I think, moving forward. And I think that will keep us from having to go down the road of changing regulations. I mean, to be able to hunt stone sheep over the counter, general open season, is a phenomenal privilege. And we need to really treat it with respect. I mean, it's the same kind of seasons that you'd have for white-tailed deer, but we need to recognize that sheep are not, they're not white-tailed deer. We need to and treat them accordingly. Have a bit of respect for these sheep. Otherwise, we may find ourselves in a position where we have to make some regulatory changes.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, hunting stone sheep over the counter is a phenomenal privilege. Wow, what more can you say about that? It truly is, and we have to treat it as such for sure. Okay, anything else on the illegal sheep harvest or peace harvest around stone sheep that we want to touch on, or are we good there?
Well, I think that covers my 2 cents on it. Yeah, I hope it's not sounding like I'm preaching or standing on a podium here. Just trying to get that message across, and really hoping that we'll have a better year next year.
Absolutely. I think we as sheep hunters have to do a better job. And I think that message, I was writing down quotes. I don't do this normally on a podcast, but I was writing down quotes. And these are so important to some of the things you said here, and really impactful. And I think we need to do a better job of communicating that and doing a better job as sheep hunters to make sure that we're looking after the resource better than we have.
Yeah, well, quickly, I'll ask you, like, what do you guys think? Like, what do you think was the cause of this year that we had?
To be blunt, you nailed it. Social media, right? There's been a lot of posts that I've seen from experienced sheep hunters and experienced writers and all that, and they're all saying the same thing, that there's people put pressure on themselves. They go out and they spend. Sheep hunting's not cheap, as you know, right? Some people can walk around the mountains with a $10,000 rifle, and thousands and thousands of dollars of gear. They put this weight on their back, and they feel that if they come back empty-handed, they're less of a person, they're less of a hunter. So I don't know. That's my first thoughts, but I wish we could put a definite cause on it. We could, because then you can address it.
Yeah, I think you've articulated it really well, Mike, and Steve. You backed them up there, and you touched on all those points. There's nothing I don't agree with there. I just think the one thing, we have to treat these animals with the reverence they deserve. They're such a iconic, unique, and sensitive species, and we just have to treat them as such. And when we cannot take them for granted, and we just have to be more deliberate in what we're doing, and think about it. And I think having that mentorship piece is really important. Not trying to pretend that because we didn't have a show, these young sheep are dying, but having that mentorship and looking up to people like yourself, and how important this is, and just getting that mindset that we cannot screw around with sheep, that we have to treat them with a sensitivity that they deserve. So yeah, I don't have a good answer, but I think you pretty much nailed it in all the points you raised, Mike. So cool. Well, we have to do better, right?
Yep, and I have faith in the community. I mean, it was such a hot topic all through the season. The awareness is definitely there, I feel. So I sense we'll have a better year coming up. And honestly, it was tough. It's probably one of the hardest, or maybe one of the worst parts of this job, is having to take these rams away. And by the end of the year, I think we had maybe 14 or something that came right through our office that, my colleague and I had to make assessments on, and it was getting really tough to see that many sheep coming in. And I hope that never happens to that extent again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. I think that we've covered that in its full detail. Anything else you want to touch on, Mike, in terms of management issues in BC around the work that you're doing, or anything we should be have front of mind for hunters in BC?
Well, there's no shortage of hot topics these days. I think we've covered a few pretty well today. I just want to thank you guys for having me on, and thank you guys for the work you're doing. The podcast is great. I've learned a lot from a lot of the guests you've had on, and then the Wild Sheep Society as a whole is a great organization, very progressive. Seem to be really leading the way for wildlife work in the province. And I've been lucky enough to work on a few wild sheep funded projects, and we have a few going on in this region that are being fully delivered by Wild Sheep Society. And speaking on behalf of all my provincial colleagues, we definitely appreciate the help and the great work you guys are doing as an organization. So keep it up.
Well, thank you, sir. And honestly, there's some pillars in our community that are really important, and definitely you're one of them, Mike. You've always been front and center and from our first sheep show, even in a non-official capacity. I just remember there was this reverence for the work that you're doing and have continued to do so, and we're just really grateful and really appreciate when you come to us and say, hey guys, we need to look at this, we need to do a better job. And we are out there trying to do the best we can, but like you said, there's a lot more work that needs to be done. So thank you for all you do, and just really appreciate you taking time to speak with us today.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I wish I could do even more, but yeah, we're doing our best out here for sure. So yeah, thanks again for having me on.
Appreciate it.